Okay. So attendance quiz done. There's a new set of virtual machines for us to play with. Hands-on 04. And I believe this will be our last other like commercial go buy it kind of firewall. So what we are going to play with is a PaloAlto firewall today. So they, in the end, it's going to be the excitement of this is how you configure interfaces, this is the structure of making rules and whatnot. And then at that point, we have another lab that's out. And in our lab, it's basically the same thing as the last one, only you pick. Either do it with the PaloAlto or the Juniper one. I don't care. You do whichever one you want. You want to do both? Great. Not going to give you, extra. I'll give you a swift thumbs up. But that's what we have to play with for today. The Palo setup is a little different because we have to do licensing things because they're worried about people stealing their stuff. So that won't be too bad, though. So what we have right now is a virtual machine running on PaloAlto boxes. It's called PanOS, and it's currently 7.1, which is a little bit older. They just released 8 last week or something, but all the way to the point you can tell they're so excited for the release of their new OS that when you load their web page, they have so much crap on it now to signify their excitement that their website is useless because it's all full of, it's like this video huge thing going on in the background, and when you actually want to try to do something, you can't, and it spikes the CPU up on your computer, and you're like, I just want to find the support portal because I have a dead fan, and this is what you get. So I'm a little annoyed by that, and it looks choppy up on the projector because it's wireless, but it's that choppy because my computer is just struggling to render this stupid web page. So I don't know what marketing person greenlit that at PaloAlto, but they failed. So anyway, they have a new operating system, but we're not using it because it's not even a week old, I don't think. So, anywho, the very first kind of difference, at least with the PaloAlto virtual machine, and to another extent as well, to physical devices, if you look really, really close, you'll notice there are 2 interfaces connected to the LAN network. Any idea why? Not for redundancy. Good try. Mirroring? No? Good try on that one. Out-of-band management. So what is out-of-band management? Or it'd say when we did stuff with the Juniper box or the pfSense box, we accessed its interface, its control management interface, by going to what? What IP address did we go to? I'm not asking for the literal IP address. Was it really a management interface, though?
Well, not technically.
No, it was just an IP address that, it was the routed IP address for the network, right? It was the default gateway for the network. And that's where pfSense stuck its admin interfaces on the actual, I'm doing work on the network interface. So, and that's the same thing that the Juniper VM we had set up did. When we have an out-of-band management interface, that means there is a whole nother network port on whatever device we're playing with that just does admin page stuff. You can't route traffic through it or anything like that. So that's kind of it's actually really weird to have on a virtual machine. I was super confused when I was setting it up. I'm like, what in the world is this interface doing? But it is pretty common to find that on networking gear, physical networking gear. There's there's generally going to be out-of-band management interfaces on them. So when you look at pictures of network equipment or like a switch with 48 ports, and then there's one port on the back that's an Ethernet port of some sort, that's probably not for plugging in like that 49th computer to, because you misplanned or something like that. That's probably where it wants its management interface to live at. So what's the perk to doing out-of-band management stuff?
One of your networks goes down.
What's that?
When one of your networks goes down, you can still manage it.
Yeah, hopefully you have some kind of management network set up so that when it goes down... Yeah. So the other side of it is you don't have to worry about accidentally putting management interfaces on like user access networks then. That's the pro to it. The con, what usually ends up happening is that management interface on the back, most of the time what people do, plug into that and then run a cable and plug it into the front of the switch. Is normally how that goes down. That's not how you're supposed to do it, but that's what most people do. Case in point, if you go to the iLab and look at like our giant mega core switch, it has 2 dedicated out-of-band management interfaces, which then plug back into itself. Because if our core switch and router goes down, I don't have any way to get to those interfaces anyway, even if I did have them plugged into a separate network. So there's pros and cons to out-of-band management stuff. For us, though, we will configure all of this. So our default username is admin, and guess what the default password is? Admin. So we get logged in, and then of course this gripes at us as well, just like the Juniper one did. Can you guys actually see the screen? Can you? Okay. Yeah, help the front light. I don't think I can turn the front lights off. Well, oh yeah, I can. Never mind. Is that better? All right. So, unlike the Juniper one, though, this will let us just roll with the default password. So, PaloAlto does a similar thing to where there's like a editing of config and then like an auditing of the device. So, never mind, it's configure, not edit, my bad. Yes?
I'm not having anything show up on my
Hit enter. So we're in configuration mode. We want to set device config, system, is it system IP address? Yeah. System IP address, set device config, system IP address, then we do like 64.43.242.2, because .1 is going to be what's actually handling traffic and being the default gateway on the network. And then we have to configure a net mask on there, which would be a slant 24. But I don't think you can enter just slant 24. I think you have to type net mask. And that should be really all we're going to do from here. The rest of the stuff we'll play around with inside of the web interface. You will find when we compare like PanOS to Junos that PaloAlto has a much nicer web interface, to the point that it will take a day and a half for it to load in our browser. And it's like really nice because you can do everything in it, but it's super slow. And I don't know why. Like, I have played with virtual machine versions of this. I've played with, the iLab has a little PaloAlto box. DSU has 2 big PaloAlto boxes. The web interface is just slow on all of them. It's just what it is. That's their claim to fame. Awesome web interface that's really slow. So, anywho, just like on the Juniper box, we commit. And this is the other comparison to Junos, is committing configs takes a long time. I don't know why. It's a feature. It's just what it does. And not like a long time. I mean, we're going to sit here for all of 15 seconds while it commits the config. But it's really annoying to sit here and just watch. There we go. That is, or should really be, about all we need to do. Questions on all of our command line goodness? To get in? Yes.
I'm probably just being dumb, but it's giving me unknown command for commit.
Did you type configure first before you set your, or like, did you go into configuration mode?
Nope, that's you.
Okay. All right. So done with that. One extra little step here. If you right-click on your admin machine, we need to insert a CD. Insert CD DVD from catalog. You don't actually have to do this. Right now, our firewalls are running unlicensed, which means they'll do basic firewalling, but they will log nothing and not give us any reporting or anything like that, which is really annoying. So we need to give it a license, which I put on this disk for us at a really early time. You can tell I super planned ahead on needing a license on these. So if you go to Insert CD and just search for Palo, P-A-L-O, there should be PaloAlto license in there. You guys find that? All right. Inserts that CD into your admin machine, and then we'll start to play around with this and see what it looks like. So we'll get logged in, open up Firefox, and we want to go to 64.43.242.2 now. However, we need to do HTTPS. And here we are. So I'll hang tight to make sure everyone get this to load for you. No troubles.
Where do you bring up the disk?
What's that?
Where do you pull up the PaloAlto disk?
Right click on the admin machine and hit Insert CD.
What's the name of it?
Palo. Just type Palo up in the search. And the other thing while we're waiting, if we type admin to log in, this will take a minute. I somehow clicked a link. But either way, this will take a minute to load. And you sit here and you're like, oh great, the web interface is broken or it hates Firefox or something. No, it's just loading. There we are. And it's going to give us exciting things about the new PanOS. So this is the way you can tell, like, I haven't logged in and played with your machines. They're super set up from scratch. So we'll close out of that. Don't show it again. So there are a few things inside of a PaloAlto firewall. Like, they really, really want to be connected to the internet. Like this, the way we're licensing it and stuff is kind of like Palo's like, well, I guess you can do that, but they would rather us just click like the activate license button and go out on the internet. There's also some stuff on this homepage that like this ACC risk factor. So what this does is analyzes your network traffic and then gives you a number like on a scale of 1 to 10 to show how risky you are. And then it's even color-coded, so like if you're getting up into the risky category, it's red, and yellow, and green. You know, and that really, I'm sure, makes everyone's day go much brighter. But anyway, there's many, many, many things we can do inside of here. We're going to keep her simple for right now. When we eventually get to the stage where we are playing with doing like layer 7 firewalling or like application identification stuff, which that will come after we have some love with NAT. So if you want to be frustrated with a firewall, that's when it'll happen. That's when you're trying to figure out NAT. But after that, we'll start to play with like actually really identifying what network traffic is and not just assuming port 80 is web traffic. Then this is generally the better platform for doing that on, as opposed to doing it in pfSense. So if you go over to the Device tab and scroll down to Licenses, and if the license ends up blowing up, it's not a huge deal. The logging thing just doesn't turn on then. And go click Manually Upload License Key, and then browse to that file on that CD. And it's going to warn you that it's going to reboot, but it's not actually going to reboot. There we go. So we get our license that I issued for us last night, and it's good until June. So as a bit of an aside, we are coming into the world now where most manufacturers are going, to where just because you went and bought the hardware or bought the firewall doesn't mean you're done paying for it. So in the case of everything that goes on with this device, like the PaloAlto one anyway, you have the opportunity to continue to pay for service and support on it, and when you let that expire, the firewall quits doing things. So, like allowing you to log traffic and whatnot. So that's a thing. I don't remember. I saw it at one point, like the amount DSU pays for our PaloAlto infrastructure, because we have PaloAlto firewalls here, and they're fairly large firewalls, but it's like, say it's like $20,000 a year or something like that. So it's a good time. Anywho, I'm not seeing what I expected to see here. When you go to Ethernet, there should be many interfaces show up. I'm going to refresh this, because it should not be blank when you go to that. Is anybody else's blank when you go to? Oh, good. That is most excellent. Let's look and see if this is doing something right now. It logged us out. I wonder if this thing rebooted. Actually did reboot. It did not reboot when I was playing with it.
When you applied the license, it said something about the device rebooting if you applied it.
Yeah, but it never did that to me last night. That's where I assumed it was just lying. But maybe it in fact did, you know. Oh, yeah. Or we just super broke it. It must have actually rebooted. What's that? Well, oh, there is, so that is a thing when this is still like waking up, and you try to log in and you're going like admin, and I'm assuming it's not, yeah, that's a thing. It's not ready yet, because I sat and hammered this over and over and over, and then it just abruptly worked, and then it was like, you've had 0 invalid login attempts. So I'm like, what the heck? It just wasn't ready. It still is prompting, but it's not ready. So yeah, I had 2 of these I was playing with last night, making sure they were going to work. Cheater is my way of, because we're sort of cheating with the licensing, so that's why I called it Cheater, to make sure I could cheat. Otherwise, for all like 90 of these firewalls we're running, I would have to go issue a license for every single one of yours, but I'm tricky with virtual machine stuff and got it to work this way. Don't tell the PaloAlto rep that, but there. This looks a little nicer. No whammy. Oh yeah, now we're going. So apparently in my monkeying around last night, it was either rebooting and I was blissfully unaware that it was rebooting, or I was watching a hockey game at the same time, so maybe it was rebooting from point A to point B when I was checking it. Anywho, license is still there. Now if we go to network, that looks much better. There are now interfaces here. So, as everyone else's device rebooted, came back up and got to log in again. Okay, now we're doing good. So, we've got 9 interfaces in here, but really only 3. So, if we go into our Ethernet 1 interface, that is going to be where our LAN network lives. So if you just double click on that, this should pop open for you to edit interface. The default interface types are taps. What's a tap? Not tapping on a table. So I eliminate that one. What other kinds of taps could we have on a network? If some sketchy person comes in and puts a network tap between you and the internet, are you going to be pleased? Probably not. No, because what's a tap going to do? Yeah, it's going to sit there and listen. We don't want, there's reasons for why we would have this device do taps, but we're not going to do that. The other option is for HA. Anyone know what HA would be an acronym for? No idea about HA? HA is for high availability. So if you do a data center tour and look at DSU's firewalls, you will notice one is alive and blinking and doing stuff. If you look at the other one, all the link lights are off on it. The firewall itself is on, but the link lights to all the interfaces are off. That is for high availability. That second firewall is just running, sitting there waiting for the other one to die, basically, is what it's doing. And it does, it dies. If we go, looking at certain, thank you so much. Yes, we need all of the updates. Here we go. So if we could look for even something, there was a power supply blew up in one of our firewalls the other night, but that doesn't trigger an HA thing. Why would you give me, current folder. Here we go. So power supplies died. That's what we need, chassis master alarm. Power supply, power supply, power supply. Here we go. On the 2nd, at 2 in the morning, our primary firewall at DSU actually blew up. It super died. Not really died, it just crashed. Which ended up being just a software bug that PaloAlto promptly fixed. But no one would have noticed here on campus, or maybe if you're up heavily browsing the internet, you would have noticed a small 10-second blip while the one firewall transferred over to the other.
So if it was a bug, why didn't it?
I actually read through, so DSU filed a support request with PaloAlto, and PaloAlto pulled all the logs and the memory dumps, we sent them off of the firewall, and there had to be a specific update come into the device at a time when a very specific TCP session was already in progress. So it was literally one particular packet that was very, very bizarre crashed the device. So to the point the support people were like, we've seen this happen one other place ever. So, but assumingly it would have dropped the session when it moved over to the other one and hence not crashed it or something. I don't know. I don't know why the other one didn't crash, but it didn't. That's the main thing. So that was what I got out of reading through the Palo engineer response and the ticketing thing. I was logging into it purely because I'm like, the fan died in mine. So mine is far less exciting of a support request. Because if you go over to the server room right now and put your head up to the IA Labs Palo firewall, you hear, wah! And then there's a red light blinking because it's upset at the fan being super dead. So, anywho, you know, there's various levels of excitement. Mine's pretty low. So, anywho, the HA is the link between two firewalls for high availability. So what it does is keeps everything synchronized between them. So it knows who's talking, who's authenticating, all that good stuff going on. A layer 2 interface would be really, really silly to configure on a firewall this big, or typically this expensive, because that would be turning it into a switch, which would be a silly thing to do. I mean, you could, but no reason for that. And virtual wires are for cheating and getting around weird networking problems. So virtual wires aren't something you'll see very often configured on an immediate interface. So from there, we want this to be a layer 3 interface. NetFlow is something I've never actually talked about in this class, but it would be a good one. Or those of you that taken routing and switching, have you talked about NetFlow before? A little bit? Okay. Like better than SNMP, but well, not necessarily better, different. Different is a good way. The other one we have is a virtual router. This is something that both Junos and PaloAlto has. So we can actually end up, like, your router needs to know its default gateway, or your firewall at home needs to know its default gateway because it needs to know the next hop to get out. So instances can come up where you have multiple internet connections. So you might have multiple copies of routing tables that are treated very, very differently. So that's what these virtual routers are, is it'll actually spin up different routing instances inside. My, I guess, example of that right now is the IA Lab has an internet connection through DSU, obviously, but we also have a Midco connection that comes in. So the IA Lab uses a virtual router to host external, or like things that we don't want on DSU's network, like for running a honeypot, or if DSU's all of our fiber gets cut, our Midco line still ironically stays up. So like a backup DNS server lives there and stuff like that. So we use virtual routers for that reason, because we have multiple internet connections. And then the last thing is that PanOS wants us to create a security zone right away when we are making an interface. And it doesn't make silly default ones to put stuff on, like the Junos one did. So we'll call this trusted when you hit to create a new zone. So from there, we obviously need to come in and make an IP address, which you can actually type in. Whoops. Here we go. 64.43.242.1/24. Also, you'll notice some engineer at PaloAlto wants to see the world burn because their default they give you, or their example, is what? Yeah, it's the top of the subnet and not the beginning of the subnet. And people shouldn't do that because that's wrong in my eyes. So I judge them for that a little bit. So, anywho, we're using the start of the subnet. If we go over to advanced, there's all sorts of crazy stuff that we can do, which we're not going to worry about. But yeah, the one interesting thing is, a lot like in Junos, if you want to allow ping, you actually have to edit the interface or the security zone to allow ping. Same within here, if we wanted to allow someone to ping this IP address or this interface, we'd have to make a management profile that allows ping to exist on the network. So basically turn the service on. I'm not going to worry about that for right now. So we'll hit OK. And we need to go do the same thing on the other interfaces. So this would be the 1 to 3rd interface, which is connected to DMZ. So here's the next bit of confusion. So we're looking at all of these. This very first interface is for management. What's something you notice that PaloAlto does when it's numbering network interfaces? It starts with 1, yeah. So that's a thing. I want this reset to normal. There we go. Yep, it starts with 1, so we have to be careful. Because now when we actually say interface 2 is really the second interface, and it actually is labeled as NIC2 in the virtual machine, because the first one is a management one, but it's really the 3rd interface in. But, you know, nothing like a little confusion for your day, right? So we want the default virtual router, and we'll make a, what should we call this? We'll just call it servers, or DMZ, something like that. So when you go to make a zone, you can see if there's other interfaces configured, you can add them automatically. The other thing you can actually do is start to tag like users or IP addresses to actually exist inside of a security zone. But we'll get the security zone set up, same with setting up the IP address, which would be 64.43.152.1, I think. After I've used these same IP addresses enough, you'd think I'd start to remember what they are, right? (64.43.152). Yep. There we go. And we set up the 3rd one. As our WAN out to our internet. And we'll make a new zone called untrusted. Which will have an IP address of 24.221.81.102. I will commit this and leave it up on the screen. I'll scooch this out of the way. So if you're still trying to grab IP addresses and whatnot. Actually, what I'll quick do is go pause recording while it commits. Okay. So configuration committed successfully. You also notice green being the happy thing. We have 3 green links now because they are plugged in and up. So if we, just as a, you know, foreshadow of what excitement would lie within, if you'd go configure one of these interfaces that doesn't exist and isn't plugged in and commit it, it's going to come up with red because it doesn't exist. So there's that. At this point, there is really nothing that's going to be super different about playing around with the Palo firewall than the Juniper firewall. Although you also notice instead of firewall rules, they're also called policies here because we don't make rules anymore, we make policies. It sounds better. It's more HR friendly or something, I don't know. So when we go over to objects, we'll make an object for server 1. Server 1, which will be, I don't know, server 1 web server, which is 64.43.152.100. Oh, there's a little add button down in the bottom corner. The other kind of handy thing that this does, like if you ever go somewhere and use it, whether it's this brand or not, it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to like purport one brand or another. I'm just showing you like, hey, there's similar things between all of these, right? So you notice there's tags here. What do you suppose the tags are for on objects or anything in here? You can tag just about anything inside of here.
Like subthread each group, like you can group them up.
Yeah, it's kind of ends up being like a hashtag almost. So like, yeah, when we log into DSU's firewall, for example, there are many rules because we have a really big network. And there are many objects in there because we have zillions of things connected all over, all this crap going on. So there is a set of rules in there that are specific for the IA lab. There's a set of rules that are specific to DS Unix. There's a set of rules that are specific to, I don't know, the library, because they've got all their weird stuff and whatnot. But when you log in here and there's 450 rules and 1,200 objects, and you want to find all the IA lab specific ones, that's really hard to do. So under tags, whenever I make something in DSU's firewall, I actually tag it with DSU IA. Now this isn't, again, going to be very exciting here because there's one thing tagged, but when I actually log into the firewall, even though there's millions of things, up in the search bar, like, I don't care about any of the crap, the great things that the library has. I only want my stuff, so I just have DSU IA up in all these search bars. So I never see any of the other wonderful things that we have to have configured for easy proxy. Seems to always be the weird thing. It's actually cool that you can access all the library research journals off campus, but the networking of that is so silly and needlessly complicated. It's not like DSU or the library's fault. It's just the way it is. So, anyway, not to pick on librarians. So, we've made a server 1 object. If we go over into policies, there are 2 rules inside of here that are predefined. There's inner zone defaults. What do you suppose those rules are doing? No guess? So basically, if we had multiple interfaces configured in the trusted zone, for example, it would allow traffic to pass around inside of there. It wouldn't firewall inside of the zone, which is kind of a sort of expected thing to have going on. So that's why we have inner zone default in there. We'll add a rule. And there are many things. Blow up on you?
Yeah, just ran out.
Oh, you ran out of power. That'll happen. So we'll make a rule. Allow trusted DMZ server 1. Something like that. And of course give it a description of allow the trusted zone to access the web server on server 1. Something like that. So we could go along and tag it again. You don't have to tag stuff, but you can because it just makes life easier. So under source, this is where it's a bit different. So if we want to allow the source in this column, or this box over here, is where we would specify specific zones. So if we go and say trusted, now we're applying this rule to the trusted zone. If we wanted to just allow certain IPs within the trusted zone, that's what goes over here. But we want to allow everyone on the trusted zone to get to the server. So if you notice, there's the very subtle any checkbox right there. That's what's going on there. The next part with users, we don't have user identification stuff turned on in here, so I'm not going to do anything, obviously. This would, what would an example of that? Actually, in the IA lab, when you have some sort of lab that has to go on the internet, you know you have to sign in, you get the captive portal web page. When you do that, you're then traffic is tagged, and I could say, like, only these 3 students are allowed to go to this IP address or something like that. I don't know. But for users, we're just going to leave that as any for right now. Destination, same thing. When we go to set the zone, we're going to untrusted. Only now. No, we're not going to untrusted. That's wrong. We're going to servers. My bad. And our destination address is server 1. Notice this comes with many predefined things in it as well, like many predefined things. So the other thing of these firewalls wanting to be super duper connected to the internet is they geotag everything. So when we have anything come in, the firewall is subscribed to a database saying, oh, that IP address is in the Czech Republic or something like that. So it's an interesting thing when we pull firewall logs, like I talk about my telnet beating on DSU all the time. It's interesting to see the geography of where all that comes from. So most of our just benign, or like not benign, but just generic backscatter traffic hitting DSU, just like automated pen test kind of utilities, basically script kiddies looking for webcams, generally comes from foreign countries. But there is some stuff from the US, but still. We, at this point, are not going to worry about the application piece because these need to be connected to the internet a brief bit for this to work. But just to peek at all of our options, if you hit add, there is, I won't say any application you can ever think of, but a good chunk of them are in here. So, yeah, like, what would be a specific thing? Let's look for Facebook stuff, if this would be preloaded. Here we go. So, we could specifically, like at DSU, allow you to do, like, go to Facebook, but block Facebook videos and chats. So the firewall actually has the ability to analyze traffic to that deep of a level that when you're on Facebook to actually pull out those particular parts and deny them, or just allow them, one or the other. So yeah, lots of stuff. This, although, is quirky, well, not quirky, it's all layer 7, like deep packet inspection stuff that we're not going to worry about right now. So we're just going to keep going. And what Palo calls ports, or what we would call a port, Palo calls a service. So if we want to allow port 80, it only has 2 services that are predefined, 80 and 443. But we would grab the HTTP one for HTTP traffic. We could also do like content filtering stuff. So keep everyone out of the home and garden category. We don't want anyone browsing that on campus, right? Which that's also obviously more of a deep inspection sort of thing. Then finally under actions, we want to allow it, log it, just for fun. That's what logging is going on here. Eventually, we will play with log forwarding, so it would be syslog stuff. But not going to worry about that for right now. So, yeah, that's our generation of a rule. The other thing, if we come in here and add a very bottom, add a deny all, source any, destination, whoop, any, application any. That should be, well, I guess I can just pick any in here too. And the action would be deny. There is interesting extra things in here, but this is extra love that Palo gives us. So we could configure it to send TCP resets in both directions, just send it to the server, or just send it to the client, or send it to both. There are other application-specific things, so if the firewall has decided it doesn't like something, it will actually try to nicely close down a session. So it has application-specific ways of killing stuff. But we're going to hit log on that. And want to obviously make sure that's second in the list. Do a commit. So for really basic going and like searching to see what's going on a network with viewing logs and stuff like that, that's where like the comparison of this interface is obviously going to be a lot nicer than the Juniper web interface because it does a lot more stuff. There we go. If we try to visit our server now, 64.43.152.100, and I'm going to refresh that to make sure it didn't cache it. Uh-oh. No, it is working. Okay. So then I'm just going to try to go to HTTPS, which the server doesn't have. It doesn't matter because the firewall's not allowing it anyway. Or we could try to do crazy things like 64.43.152 and try to go to it on a weird port, 12345. Another tidbit of real browsers, I don't know if I talked about this or not. If you try to go to like HTTP, semicolon, like, and maybe real browsers isn't the word for this, but try to go to it on port 22. What's on port 22? SSH. Firefox will be like, no, that's dumb. I'm not going to let you do that. Guess what browser will give it a go? Yeah, the glue eater. Right here. Like, even though there's nothing on here, but if we try to go to this, Internet Explorer's like, I'm trying. Let's give it a go. But I have not found any browser. 22, what's another one? Not 21. I don't know. There's a few other ports that most real browsers will just be like, no, I'm not even going to try that, and it just tells you to go away. Well, whereas Internet Explorer is over here, like, giving it its full go, trying to connect on port 22. So, anywho, that should have given us some interesting things if we come over to monitor now. Yes, many interesting things. So, yeah. It gives us a really, exciting view. It was trying hard enough that we now have 3 pages of logs. If you look down here, they are tabbed. But you should actually see our browser if you scroll through it far enough. There should be some allowed traffic going in there. Right here. And if you hit the little magnifying glass, it will give us all sorts of stuff, telling us even like the timestamps and whatnot from the start and the end of the TCP session. Since this actually did ship with a slightly, it's not new, but it still exists. This IP address, 64.43.152, it's actually a South Dakota IP address that you would actually see if you went floating around. So it's identified as like, hey, that's on the US, and here in the US, and here's the interfaces and all that good stuff. So it's neat. The other cool stuff we can do is actually tag, like when this rule fires, generate a PCAP of the traffic. So what would a PCAP do for us? Yeah, it would actually allow us to download this exact session in Wireshark and open it up and actually see every single packet. That's not generally something I would recommend doing, depending on how busy the rule is. Why is that? Yeah, like you'll fill your firewall's hard drive up, and then that's that. So that is our very quick little overview of doing firewalling with a PaloAlto device. You guys are welcome to play around inside of these or do whatever. Oh, look at our risk factor has now been updated. We are a 1. So low risk. Anyway, you're welcome to play around in here. Since these are not connected to the internet, there are a few things that will not necessarily work. That and you're not going to have any exciting traffic you're really going to generate. So, but as we get further along in class, we'll play around with all of the great features inside of here and what all we can do with it. So does anybody have any questions on making rules or this or the assignment in general? Nothing? This was a quick class period even with the weird confusion of my VM rebooting on me. All right. So to foreshadow what's going to be coming up, the next things we're actually going to start to play with in class is going to be NAT. Not that NAT is a good thing, and I want you all to love NAT, because NAT is dumb, but NAT is a necessary evil, and everywhere you go is going to use it. So you have to, unfortunately, know it, even though, like, if we were in an IP6 only world, we wouldn't even talk about NAT, because it shouldn't exist. But unfortunately, that is not the case. So that's what we're going to start to play with next time. But with that, I will leave you with a early completed class period on today, Thursday. Oh, one particular tweak. Do not, if you like want to use these VMs for your homework, do not press this button. Because what this will do, like the red button, right? Red button of doom. But what that will do is, I mean, it just turns off your virtual machines, but it deprovisions these networks from our switch. And for some reason, the PaloAlto firewall required a very weird configuration on these, so I had to set that up for us all last night. So when you hit stop, it's going to delete those networks that are set up, which is normal and fine. But in this case, since they have something weird, when you go to start them back up again, they will not have the special config and your firewall will not work. So heads up as to that. If you do accidentally hit the stop button, just email me and I can fix it. And you are free to like reboot the machines. Don't worry about that. Just don't hit the stop button. Or probably don't hit the pause one either. Don't ever do that with the firewall VMs. They'll be very angry. So we'll see you on Tuesday.